China Global Television Network.
Guinea's opposition leader Diallo supports the military junta as the African Union suspends the country from all AU activities. Nigerian security agencies seized 4 tons of fertilizer that were to be used in making bombs. And a Zimbabwean chief's court orders Mugabe's remains to be reburied in Harare. Hello and welcome. You're watching Africa Live. We're coming to live from Nairobi. I'm Hannah Viviers, and here with the latest in business is Rama.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Here's what's coming up in the next 30 minutes. Tanzania has ratified the African Continental Free Trade Area Treaty. And Libya's power struggles are threatening oil output and exports yet again. We'll have the details on those stories and lots more coming your way in the course of the hour. For now, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Hannah.
Thank you, Rama. We'll see you in a bit. Well, the situation in Guinea continues to top the headlines in news from Africa. The latest is that opposition leader Diallo has expressed his support for the military junta's move to overthrow Alpha Conde's government. Here's CGTN's Wanda Mugabe with the very latest.
It's seemingly calm in the streets of Conakry, Guinea's capital. This is days after the military junta overthrew Alpha Conde's government on Sunday. Opposition leader Diallo has come out to show support for the coup leaders.
September 5th is a day that marks the victory of our people and the fall of the dictatorial regime of Alpha Conde. It is the experience of a new beginning for our nation. Our army, represented by the National Committee for Rally and Development, in a patriotic leap forward, has taken a historic step that has completed the fight led by our alliance and other living forces of the country who love justice and democracy. Our political coalition takes note of the seizure of power by the army. The motives behind its action are salutary, and their purpose is in line with our aspirations, which are the reunification of our nation, the rebuilding of our state, the fight against corruption and impunity.
Diallo had earlier in the week expressed interest to be part of the transition government. In the meantime, Guineans are worried for peace and security.
We have many problems, but what concerns us most is security. We are asking the young soldiers to secure the markets and the economic operators. Since their declaration, we have seen fewer soldiers in the streets. So for us, things are slowly returning to normal, and that reassures us.
Colonel Dambuya on Monday had reassured citizens and investors of stability, saying businesses would not be affected. Opposition leader Diallo, on the other hand, is urging coup leaders to ensure that they lead national reconciliation efforts. He's also requesting them to restore the rule of law. His remarks echo those made by ECOWAS. The regional bloc is also meeting the junta in Conakry. Wanjamungai, CGTN.
We're staying in West Africa. Let's head over to Nigeria now, where the army says it has seized 14 tons of fertilizer it believes was to be used to make bombs by terror group Boko Haram. The seizures were made at 2 locations in the country's northeastern states of Borno and Yobe. With more details of that seizure, here is Tesem Akende.
Nigeria's army spokesman, Brigadier General Onyema Nwachukwu, said in a statement on Thursday the fertilizers were supplied by a syndicate that provided materials to insurgents for the manufacture of improvised explosive devices. He noted that the fertilizers include 281 bags of urea, each weighing 50 kilograms. The spokesman added that the embattled insurgents in the country are desperately trying to manufacture devices to kill and destroy more lives and property in the country. The authorities say about 6,000 of the insurgents recently surrendered to superior firepower from troops of the nation's armed forces. The United Nations Development Programme says attacks by the group in more than 10 years have killed more than 35,000 people and left 8.7 million people in need of humanitarian assistance. President Muhammadu Buhari has approved around $33 million for a community policing scheme across the country, including the troubled Northeast. He has also urged residents in the region to provide security agencies with necessary information that could help locate terrorists in hiding. Boko Haram is a terror group operating mostly in Nigeria's northeast region and some countries around Lake Chad, such as Niger and Cameroon. Tessim Akende, CGTN Jos, Nigeria.
We head over to Southern Africa now, where Zimbabwe's government insists that everyone working in the public sector must either be vaccinated or risk losing their jobs. This is despite its mandatory inoculation directive being challenged in court by the country's largest labor union. Reporting from Zimbabwe's capital, Harare, here's Farai Mokutuya.
Zimbabwe's Justice Minister says the government has not shifted its policy on voluntary COVID-19 vaccinations. He says civil servants are free to choose not to get the jab, but should seek employment elsewhere.
If you choose, which is your choice, to work for government, there are rules that pertain to government employees. If you want to be part of that group of civil servants, you must abide by the rules that pertain to that group. For the protection of fellow workers and the generality of the people, we are saying if you are employed by the state, you must get vaccinated.
There is no law making vaccination mandatory here.
Some legal experts argue that enacting one would be unconstitutional because it would infringe on fundamental rights that cannot be taken away in any context, including a relationship between an employer and their employees.
So in this case, that will undermine human dignity quite seriously for government to do that. So they will be infringing Section 51 of our Constitution. They will also be infringing Section 52, which does provide that you cannot be subjected to some scientific experiment, because under the current scientific knowledge relating to vaccines, no one can say 100% that a certain thing has to happen so that certain things happen as well.
The Zimbabwe Congress of Trade Unions has sued 8 companies that have asked their employees not to report for work unless they are vaccinated, calling the move discriminatory and an unfair labor practice. A ruling is expected soon. Whichever way it goes, it's unlikely to calm the heated debate over this contentious matter.
I would not want to speculate. I will wait and see which court would now regulate how we relate at our workplace, which is within the confines of the Constitution. The Constitution does not bar us from having regulations and standard operating procedure manuals at a workplace.
The government has accelerated its vaccination drive in recent weeks. By September the 9th, nearly 1.8 million people had been fully inoculated. Farai Mokutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
South Africa and Kenya are part of a global pediatric trial of China's CoronaVac vaccine, which is manufactured by Sinovac. The vaccine has already been approved for emergency use on adults in South Africa. It will now be tested on children for the first time. The trial was launched at Pretoria's Sefako Makatu Hospital on Friday. CGTN's Julie Shire reports.
South Africa's first COVID-19 vaccine trial on children kicked off in Pretoria today. The first 2 South African children aged 15 and 17 bravely took the Chinese-manufactured CoronaVac jab.
We need to protect them because they are, in other words, getting the infection and they are able then to transmit it to the rest of the population. We also do notice severe infections in children. They are not spared. We also do see these severe infections in children. And I think the latest statistics is that just in the last couple of months, already 400 children have died.
South Africa, along with Kenya, are the only 2 African countries participating in the global pediatric trial. The treatment has already been safely tested in adults and children in China.
They have already provided more than 90 million doses to children in China. And I have recently received the adverse event report following vaccination, and there has been literally no issues with the safety of this vaccine already being given to children aged 3 to 17 years in China.
The trial involving 14,000 children globally will run for over a year. 2,000 minors between 6 months and 17 years will be from South Africa.
The very same rule or principles that apply to adults insofar as getting back to a state of normality, we are looking to trigger that via this trial, and then should we have a successful trial, that we have in fact a rollout of vaccines to those below the age of 18.
The under-18s make more than a third of South Africa's population of 60 million. Children have so far been less affected by COVID-19 than adults. But with the Delta variant still highly prevalent, the numbers of serious cases are slowly ticking up. Over 14 million vaccines have so far been administered to adults, but the health department now wants to ensure that the entire population is protected from COVID-19. Chirishara, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
Well, Saturday, the 11th of September, marks the 20th anniversary since the 9/11 attack took place in the United States. The tragic event on September of 2001 claimed the lives of 2,977 people. 19 terrorists had hijacked 4 commercial aircraft, crashing into the Pentagon, Twin Towers, the World Trade Center, and a field in rural Shanksville, Pennsylvania. The repercussions of the 9/11 attack are still present today in America. It's led to tightened security at airports, the militarization of the police, and more stringent measures to curb terrorism. Well, now joined by Zmarilai Abbasin, who is in Kabul, Afghanistan, to speak about the situation there and just how the Afghans on the ground are reacting to this. Abbasin, 9/11 was a trigger to America's occupation of Afghanistan. How are people in the country reacting to the upcoming 20th anniversary?
Hello, Anna. These last 20 years were the hardest years for Afghan people, particularly in villages. Somehow it was opportunity for the people living in the cities. There was a gap and a distance between the villages and cities and all. And millions of people were educated and the children were able to go to schools, yet there were problems. And on the other hand, the Afghan government has been very much corrupt, and the warlords and land grabbing and mafia, everything was erupting besides the presence of United States of America and the coalition forces in the country. Yet after 20 years in the country, the people are now divided. Some of them were seeking the presence of U.S. forces in Afghanistan in some cities as an opportunity, and the villages, it was a disaster, a nightmare that came to an end. At the same time, during this war, at least 3,500 coalition forces were killed, which 2 of 3 of them were U.S. forces, and 20,000 more of the United States forces were injured during this war. On the other hand, there were also billions of dollars wasted in Afghanistan, and the trillions of dollars that the United States only has spent was far much less than it could be of any benefit for the people of Afghanistan. But as I mentioned, the corruption was something avoiding any kind of progress in the country, particularly in the villages. While on the other hand, the people of Afghanistan see this worse and also better, and they have kind of mix of their reactions to the 9/11. And after that, the question remains, if the United States was leaving Afghanistan with 18.5 million people suffering humanitarian catastrophe, while there was a corruption and the country was fall again to the Taliban, and they're again on the power and they seek cooperation with the United States. So the question remains, why were they fighting in Afghanistan? Why was Afghanistan occupied where there is now, if it was about Osama bin Laden, he was killed in May 2011. So many of these questions is unanswered, and also the United States is pledging they will release some secret documents about this incident. Whatever it is, for the people of Afghanistan, it was a mix, bad and good and different eras. Hannah.
John Terrett is standing by in Washington, D.C. for us. John, let's bring you in here. As Maralai just said, so many mixed reactions from the people in Afghanistan. Just speak to us about 20 years on, how significant is tomorrow's anniversary to the American people?
Well, you know, Hannah, I think the first thing to say is that the 9/11 event 20 years ago happened on a Tuesday, so it was a work day, and the 20th anniversary, which is coming up tomorrow, Saturday for us, is obviously going to be a Saturday, a weekend day, and this whole area around Ground Zero where I am is going to be a lot quieter. So today, Friday, is a very important day for people in New York, and the ceremonies began early this morning over at the New York Stock Exchange, which is only about 2 streets away from where I am. And the stock exchange was very, very badly affected by the events of 9/11, 2001. And today, at 9:03 in the morning, which is the exact moment 20 years ago that Flight 175 went into the South Tower, there was a very emotional ceremony at the stock exchange with members of staff on the trading floor putting their hands on their hearts, as is tradition here in America, as the national anthem was played in a very somber mood. And indeed, the stock exchange was closed for 7 days. It didn't reopen until the following Monday, the 17th. And a little story which I always like to tell is that the trade unions in Lower Manhattan, who are actually quite powerful, unions are still very powerful in the United States, and they said, look, we're tearing up all our rules. They said to their members, look, just go back to work, get the place going again, just do whatever you have to do. That's fine. There will be no work to rule. And the thing is, 20 years on, this is still a very, very raw event for people who were there, and indeed all Americans. I think the big ones are, 5, 10, 15, and now this one. The interim date's not quite so much. And I do think it's worth pointing out that although this was a terrible event in which commercial airliners loaded with people and fuel were driven into buildings, there have been other terrible terrorist events in the last 20 years. Think of 7/7 in London, when the terrorists targeted the underground and also the buses there, and think also in 2015, in November of that year, of the attack in the Saint-Denis region of Paris around the Bataclan Theatre. And of course, we've had terrorist attacks all over the continent of Africa, on and off, as we know. But that day, 20 years ago, there was an innocence that was shattered here in North America. Americans felt very safe by the Atlantic, by the Pacific, by their friends Canada to the north and their friends Mexico to the south. And that all went on that day. And I still know people who live in the suburbs where I live, just outside the city, who will not come in here, even now, 20 years on, because of the events that happened on 9/11, 2001. Now, tomorrow, security will be very tight, and there are 3 reasons for that. First of all, the 13 deaths of the U.S. military at the gate at the Kabul airport a couple of weeks ago, the New Zealand stabbing in Auckland a couple of weeks ago, and the fact that Al-Qaeda is talking up this event. They are celebrating this event on their websites and their publications. But the authorities say, as we come up to the anniversary tomorrow, Saturday, no major threats have been flagged up.
Maralai, let's bring it back to you. I mean, all of this is coming on the back of that U.S. withdrawal. We know what's happening in Afghanistan at the moment. What are you hearing? It is still very fresh, but what are you hearing about the relations between the U.S. and the new Afghan government at the moment?
Well, the reaction from the new Afghan government, which is the acting government in Afghanistan, established and formed by the Taliban, and now it's uncertain what would it look like in the future, and they've been saying that they will complete the structure of the cabinet. They have already announced a couple of days ago, and yet there have been urging the international community to step up to Afghanistan because the humanitarian catastrophe has been happening, and their acting Prime Minister Mohammad Hassan Khan just today said in an audio clip sent to the media, he said that we will struggle for security and prosperity of the people of Afghanistan, yet urging all the Taliban members to cooperate in this regard, and said there is no revenge, no avenger issues and agendas among the Taliban, while on the other hand some other members of the Taliban, like their Culture Commission member Inamullah Samangani said, it's a new Afghanistan. There is much more for the international community to assist the people of Afghanistan, but no interference and military and political. That's a part of the Doha agreement between United States of America and the Taliban, and yet the international community is not on the same page in regard to Afghanistan. There is no coordination in this regard. Whether the new government in Afghanistan is urging international community to just step up. Yet UN and also the Risk Crescent Committee also have urged all the international community members to accelerate their effort and assistance to Afghanistan, because Afghanistan is relied on 75% of its assistance from the international community, and that's why the Taliban seems to be much serious about the governance. And they say, we have been fighting for 30 years, we have been involved in politics for years, and now we know our mistakes, and that's why we are going to a serious government in the country. And now it's time to for the winning of the hearts of the people in Afghanistan. So it's up to the Taliban. They are urging, but UN, as they've been showing their eagerness, is now up to them. How can they allocate all these funds and assistance to Afghanistan to prevent further looming humanitarian catastrophe in the country?
Thank you so much for that, Zmaralai Abbasin speaking to us from Kabul in Afghanistan, and of course John Tarrant was speaking to us from Washington, D.C. Well, do remember that we will have in-depth coverage marking the 20th anniversary since the 9/11 attacks. Let's now take a short break and return. More news making headlines here on Africa Live, including Zimbabwean Chief's Court orders Mugabe's remains to be reburied in Harare. And South Africa's Western Cape launches a reading event to tackle low literacy rates.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Juba,
Johannesburg, Ethiopia,
Tanzania. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. You're watching Africa Live. Well, a Zimbabwean court has ordered former President Robert Mugabe's body be exhumed. According to the court order, he is to be reburied at the National Heroes Acre in Harare. The ruling comes after a traditional court had initially ordered for Mugabe's body to be exhumed by July the 1st. 3 of the former president's children challenged the ruling. Mugabe was buried in 2019 at his rural home. Well, CGTN's Farai Makutia joins us live from Zimbabwe's capital, Harare. Farai, thank you so much for joining us. The ruling was first handed down by a traditional court before being challenged by Mugabe's 3 children. Can you tell us why the court overthrew their challenge?
Well, the magistrate who heard that case in Ichinoi, which is the provincial capital of the area in which Mugabe was buried and where he hailed from, said that the 3 children were not party to what happened at the burial and so had no right to approach the courts. According to the court, I think the interpretation is that the children were not the ones who made the decision or were behind the decision to have Mugabe buried in his traditional village. What happened 2 years ago is that the Mugabe family and many people believe that it was the former First Lady who prevailed and made the decision that Mugabe should be buried in the courtyard of his home in Zimba. And so the court ruling that those children had no right, had no place, and should not be the ones who are approaching the court, and so therefore overruled their petition.
Farai, what happens now? Can the family appeal this decision any further?
Well, it's more than likely that there will be an appeal. What we've been told by the lawyer who represented the 3 children is that the former First Lady, Mugabe's widow, had separately sought a review of that traditional court ruling, and that will be heard by the courts on the 21st of this month, on the 21st of September. So the outcome, that ruling may be different from what has been handed down today, because the former First Lady was directly involved in those events. So perhaps that might give a different ruling, but if it doesn't go their way, it is likely that the Mugabe family will appeal this, because they are very, they are opposed to what is happening here. They believe that the former president must be allowed to rest, and that they followed his final wishes to be buried in his in his village home and not at the National Heroes Acre. But I think what's also quite interesting is that it's not just the legal aspect that is quite interesting. I remember speaking to a traditional and cultural leader who pointed out that there's also a very complex and intricate process that must happen if this exhumation is to go ahead. There are certain rituals that must take place. So it's not just the legal aspect that is quite interesting here. There's also quite a lot of cultural and traditional intrigue.
Farai, thank you so much for all that. Farai Mwakutuya speaking to us from Zimbabwe's capital, Harare. Well, according to a recent study, more than half of South African schools lack libraries. The Progress in International Reading Literacy study also showed that nearly 80% of grade 4 learners in South Africa, usually children aged around 9 years old, cannot read for comprehension. On International Literacy Day this year, learners in South Africa's Western Cape province participated in an event to highlight the importance of reading and writing.
Thousands of school children in and around the city of Cape Town took part in the launch of a new book called Yola and the Trusted Crown. It's the story of an 8-year-old girl who learns that even kids have the power to deal with life's challenges, especially when they wear their own trusted crowns.
This book is really about resilience. At the core of it is, when things go wrong, what do you do? I want kids to know that when things go wrong, that they have things they can do that's in their own power, and that there's also people available to help them. The book is really to help the kids cope with the coronavirus, but I think the message is extendable to life in general.
COVID-19 brought with it a socio-economic crisis and a human tragedy that impacted on learning and education. Our learners' curriculum is so far behind, and what we really wanted to do was to encourage the love for reading. At a time like this, it's more important now than it ever has been before. And what we want to do is get our learners over the line.
Educators say reading is a great way for learners to escape from the harsh realities of poverty and crime, as well as the pandemic.
Most of them grow up in very, very difficult circumstances. They deal with adversity every day. So reading and books and having books just lifts them out of that. So literacy for me, for our learners, is really something for them to lean on in times of adversity like this.
We want to help the learners to pick up the book and feel confident to read the book. In that way, it gives them that, it livens the dream for them that they can become something better and move beyond their circumstances. So for us, it's very important to educate our learners, and we have fun while we do that.
The aim of World Literacy Day is to highlight the importance of literacy to individuals, communities, and societies. To these kids at this time, it's about giving them hope to help them cope with the impact of COVID-19.
The celebration of World Literacy Day is truly important. The kids that we spoke to today and read for today are at foundational phase, and it's very important that at this stage they learn how to read.
What are the 3 rules to keep you safe from the virus?
Yola and the Trusted Crown has so far been printed in 4 of South Africa's 11 official languages. Renata Alcom, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
In Uganda, a group of volunteers is donating food and household items to young mothers living with HIV. The coronavirus pandemic has forced many HIV-positive people out of work, leaving them struggling to even feed themselves. Isabel Nakira reports from Kampala.
Eva Nampaji lost her job 6 months ago, one of many victims of the economic crisis triggered by the coronavirus pandemic. She used to sell tea in the evenings by a roadside market in Nsanji, outside Kampala. But since the government imposed a curfew as a measure to limit the spread of COVID-19, Nampaji became jobless. The single mother of 3 who is HIV positive is now going hungry.
After COVID struck, I no longer prepare tea to sell. I stay home. Sometimes I even fail to get what to eat. We are not allowed to stay out late anymore.
Nampaji is on life-saving antiretroviral drugs and also needs to maintain a good diet to keep her immune system strong. She's one of a handful of people living with HIV who have benefited from donations from a volunteer group in Kampala. But the few kilograms of maize flour she's got now will run out in days.
Sometimes I get dizzy and can't even stand up. I feel general body weakness, but when I eat on time, I find no problem taking my medicine.
Campaigners say the HIV-positive community in Uganda has been hit hard by the pandemic.
Most of them, they don't have what to eat, and the drugs that they are taking, it is really so strong that needs someone to be feeding good and also having food on time.
Doctors worry that gaps in treatment can cause a drug resistance in HIV patients, which may reverse initial improvements. Uganda has 1.4 million people living with HIV, and 1.3 million of them receive antiretroviral treatment. But if they can't get treatment, there could be devastating consequences.
Are more likely going to progress to disease later on. This is someone who can pass on the virus, unlike someone who has a virus which is still susceptible to treatment and is well controlled, it's undetectable. So even their chances of passing on the virus are very slim.
UNAIDS, the Joint United Nations Programme on HIV, says deaths due to AIDS have gone down in Uganda by 60% over the last decade due to better access to drugs and treatment. Good nutrition and drug management are cornerstones in HIV care, but with the pandemic still pushing people out of work, that's becoming impossible for many HIV patients. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Well, I'll be standing by to bring you more in Africa Live, including the latest in sport. But now let's take a look at what's happening in the world of business with Rama.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Here's what's coming up in business news. Tanzania has ratified the African Continental Free Trade Area Treaty. And Libya's power struggle is threatening the country's oil output and oil exports yet again.
The East China Sea, home of dream seekers, where China's hub for reform and opening up connects with the maritime Silk Road. Whether it's exploring the busiest seaport and trade zone, or witnessing how locals strive for a better life. Join CGTN's adventure, Tides of Change Part 2. A journey enchanted by a dynamic ocean and beyond.
Let's start in East Africa. Tanzania's government has announced that the East African state has finally signed up to the Continental Free Trade Area Treaty. Lawmakers over there ratified the CFTA agreement on Thursday, 2 years after the former president John Magufuli signed the agreement. Now, that ratification is an indicator of President Samia Suluhu Hassan's intent to refocus on regional integration. The CFTA hopes to double intra-African trade, which currently accounts for roughly 18% of overall continental trade volumes, by removing a combination of non-tariff and tariff barriers on a broad range of goods and eventually services as well. This agreement entered into force on the 30th of May 2019 after the required minimum of 21 of the African Union's 55 member states ratified it. Trading under CFTA rules started on the 1st of January 2021 after a 6-month delay. Business at Tanzania's ports is still relatively strong despite the disruption of trade caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Increased port revenues are being attributed to improved infrastructure and better cargo handling at the ports of Dar es Salaam and Mtwara. Here's CGTN's Isaac Lucando with the details.
Tanzania's ports are performing well despite the COVID-19 pandemic. In the last 6 months, the country's ports handled 1 million more tons of cargo than it did in the same period last year, bringing in some $229 million. Eric Hamisi, the man tasked with overseeing Tanzania's ports, says not going into COVID lockdowns, improving infrastructure and overall efficiency is yielding double-digit growth in revenues.
If you look at July 2020, and July 2021, that is almost 23% increase of throughput. So we are doing well, and August this year is going to be even better.
Deepening of berths at the port of Dar es Salaam has enabled larger ships and volumes of cargo to come through. Players in the shipping industry say improvements at the port of Dar es Salaam have raised their business prospects.
We used to bring ships here and they wait 1 to 4 days out anchorage waiting for berth. Now, almost ship is coming and berthing directly on average. If there is a delay, it will be in hours, not in days like it was in the past.
Before the improvements, the World Bank estimated that shipping companies would lose around $252 million annually due to anchorage costs as a result of long delays. The bank believes that with improved efficiency, Tanzania's ports stand to contribute an additional 7% to the country's GDP.
The port of Dar es Salaam is currently the largest of several ports in Tanzania, handling 95% of the country's international trade. An increase in the volume of cargo that passes through here not only benefits the country's economy, but also the 8 landlocked countries served by it.
17 million tons of cargo passed through the port of Dar es Salaam last year, and only 5 million of them were transit cargo going to neighboring countries. Authorities say there is room for improvement.
We want to see the number going up, because that is, if you work out numbers, that is only 30% transit cargo. So this port is not for Dar es Salaam only, it's not for Tanzania only. This port is for the region.
The Tanzania Ports Authority says $100 million is being invested in new equipment to further improve the capacity of ports in the country. It hopes this will help the country become the #1 port in Africa within the next 10 years. Isaac Lucando, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Over to North Africa now, Libya to be specific. A fresh wave of protests at oil fields and ports over there is threatening to derail months of stability in the OPEC members' crude production. Demonstrators have been calling for the dismissal of the head of the National Oil Corporation, Mustafa Sanala. This comes as the conflict over who runs the country's oil sector continues to grow between Sanala and Libya's oil and gas minister, Mohamed Aoun. Libya's crude production has recently been hovering around 1.1 to 1.2 million barrels a day, but officials over there expect output to drop by as much as 800,000 barrels a day in the days to come due to these disruptions. On the opposite end of the continent, South Africa's manufacturing output was down by over 4% year on year in July. That's after rising by a revised figure of nearly 12% in the month of June. According to Statistics South Africa, petroleum, chemical products, rubber and plastics led the way. The combined output fell by over 23%. The output of motor vehicles, parts and accessories and other transport equipment did go up, however, by 6.1%. And that's despite the impact of the unrest and the looting that we saw back in July, which saw Toyota shut down its factory in Durban for more than a week. Seasonally adjusted manufacturing production was down 8% in July 2021 compared with June of the same year. It fell 5.5% in the 3 months to the end of July compared to the previous 3 months. Now, this followed month-on-month decreases of 1.3% in June and 2.4% in July. We're still in the country. South Africa's agricultural sectors had a very good production and harvesting season. Tractor sales in August stood at 724 units, going up by nearly 56% year on year. Here's Angela Coppola with the details.
Not only are tractor sales up, 14 combine harvesters were sold in August. And on a year-to-date basis, combine harvester sales are now 25% up on last year. And that's due to the good crop yields.
South Africa is having one of the fantastic seasons in 2020-21 production season. Because now, I mean, that's like the second largest on record, around about just over 16 million tons.
Farmers in the summer cropping areas have just had a good harvesting season, had a good production season. It's not quite a record maize crop, but it's one of the highest maize crops ever. The soybean crop, which is the second biggest crop, is the highest crop ever. And overall, commodity prices have been good. So the farmers' net income has been good.
That net income growth has led to many farmers replacing their machinery.
The tractor sales, as one of the important indicators, have been growing by double digits in South Africa since about mid-2020 coming into this year.
It's important to have good equipment because a lot of the processes in agriculture are timeless. So they've taken the opportunity to replace equipment, not just tractors, but combine harvesters as well.
Tractors and combine harvesters make up 75% of the monetary value of the new agricultural machinery market, which is estimated at $715 million, and most of it is imported.
The prices have improved because of the stronger rand, but it's still a very, very competitive market. So everybody sharpens their pencils very, very carefully in accordance with what the rand value at which they brought in the machine was and is likely to be.
The agricultural sector had a good season. Confidence is high, harvests are up, commodity prices have improved, and exports are solid with a $1.5 million agricultural trade surplus. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Away from the continent now, China's head of state Xi Jinping says that recent US policies towards China have strained bilateral ties, and that's not in the interest of the citizens of either country. He made the comments during a phone conversation with his American counterpart, President Joe Biden, on Friday. President Xi says that the two countries need to work together to bring relations back on the right track and to shoulder more international responsibilities, given the broad range of global challenges out there. He also called for mutual respect, dialogue and cooperation in different areas. President Biden stressed the importance of Sino-American relations. He called for an open and straightforward approach to issues of common concern and finding more ground on major global challenges like climate change. Both leaders agreed to bring relations back on the right track and to expand cooperation on climate change, the pandemic and the economic recovery. Let's take a look at some key monetary indicators for the month of August from China. Broad money supply over there was up by over 8% compared to a year ago to 231 trillion yuan, roughly $35.8 or so trillion last month. According to data from the People's Bank of China, narrow money supply was up by over 4% to nearly $9.8 trillion on an annual basis in August. Chinese banks extended new loans of around $190 billion last month, down almost $10 billion compared to a year ago. Total social financing, that's a broad measure of credit and liquidity in the economy, stood at nearly $465 billion in August, falling by over 10.3% compared to a year earlier. Bilateral trade between China and ASEAN member states remained relatively robust in the first 8 months of the year. According to China Customs, two-way trade was up 22% on a yearly basis to nearly 3.6 trillion yuan, roughly $560 billion. That accounts for about 15% of China's total foreign trade. Chinese exports to ASEAN countries from January to August rose by 21% on an annual basis. Imports are up by 24% in the same period. China's trade surplus with ASEAN stood at $56 billion in the first 8 months of the year, up 8% year on year. China has been ASEAN's largest trading partner for 12 consecutive years. ASEAN, on the other hand, was China's biggest trading partner last year. And I'll leave it there for the time being, but we'll be back at the top of the hour. In global business, we'll be looking at what central banks have been up to. Around 80% of them around the world are exploring digital currencies. Already 6 countries right here in Africa are exploring the potential and the risks that come along with central bank digital currencies. Small economies in the Caribbean and in Africa on the bleeding edge of this new tech. So why exactly are they exploring this, and what does this mean ultimately for you? We'll explore that and plenty more at the top of the hour. See you then. For now, back to Hannah.
We look forward to that. Thanks, Rama. We'll see you then. Let's now take a short break and return to your sport news, including we meet the Nigerian boxer aiming to bring the sport's prestige back to his nation.
It's just taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Time for a look now at what's happening in the world of sport. For many years, Nigeria was a boxing powerhouse on the African continent, especially at amateur level. But the sport has